Words are not innocent. In the beginning was the Word. So begins one of the oldest texts. It is not a metaphor. It is a warning. Because what we name takes form, what we repeat becomes reality, and what we keep silent also builds us in silence. Today you will discover the hidden power of language, not the one you use with others, but the one you use with yourself, because your words are bricks with which you build your identity, your relationships, and even your destiny. Your language shapes your perception of the world. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are, and largely as we speak. Language is not a neutral mirror of reality. It is a lens, a mold, a filter that selects what we perceive and how we interpret it. What you name takes form. What you repeat becomes your map of the world. And what you keep silent continues to exist, but in the shadows where it can grow unchecked. When someone says, "I am a failure," they are not describing a fact. They are creating an identity. They are encapsulating their entire history in a sentence that closes off possibilities. That phrase becomes an emotional prison that limits every step. Now imagine that instead of saying, "I am a failure," that same person said, "I am learning through mistakes." The fact is the same, but the internal world that is built is completely different. Solomon said it directly and eternally. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. It is not a metaphor, it is a psychic reality. The words you choose day after day are like seeds you cast into the soil of your consciousness. Some germinate into hope, others into fear. Some heal you, others slowly destroy you. Think about this. How many times have you limited yourself just by how you talk to yourself? How many times have you told yourself, "I can't, it's impossible, that's just how I am"? That voice, repeated over and over, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not because the world closes doors to you, but because you yourself have declared that you don't deserve to open them. Profound change doesn't start with big decisions. It starts with small phrases. Changing your language is the first act of inner revolution. Because when you change your words, you change your perception. And when you change your perception, you begin to change your destiny. Internal dialogue, the voice that never stays silent. We all have an inner voice, not the one we use to talk to others, but the one that accompanies us when we are silent, when no one sees us. That voice that activates in moments of doubt, pain, error. And though it may not seem like it, that inner voice has more power than any external word. Because you don't just hear it, you believe it. That voice can be a compassionate ally, or a cruel judge. It can lift you when you fall, or push you further to the ground. Many people carry invisible wounds not because of what others told them, but because of what they learned to repeat to themselves. "I'm not enough. I always mess everything up. No one will love me as I am." Words that became embedded as absolute truths, even though they were born of pain and not reality. Freud said that the superego, that critical inner voice, is formed in childhood from authority figures. But Solomon, centuries before, already warned, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." What you tell yourself internally becomes what you project externally. If you live repeating that you don't deserve, you will act as if you don't deserve. If your internal dialogue is violent, you will end up treating yourself as your worst enemy. And the most dangerous thing is that you will get used to that voice. You will stop questioning it. You will assume that this constant criticism is you, but it's not you. That voice was built with phrases from others, with fears, with unprocessed experiences. You weren't born talking to yourself this way. You learned. And just as you learned to mistreat yourself, you can also learn to talk to yourself with love. Changing your internal dialogue doesn't mean lying to yourself or making empty affirmations. It means being honest, but with compassion. It means telling yourself, "I am in process. I can improve. I have the right to make mistakes without destroying myself." It's about turning your inner voice into a refuge, not a battlefield. Remember, you cannot escape from yourself, but you can learn to be a good companion on your own journey. And it all begins with a decision, choosing how you talk to yourself when no one else is listening. Inherited words, languages you didn't choose. Long before you learned to express yourself, you were already absorbing language, but not just words, also silences, tones, gestures, ways of loving or repressing. You learned, without realizing it, how affection is expressed, how a no is received, how a mistake is punished. And that emotional language, many times, was not chosen by you. You inherited it. You grew up with voices you now repeat. Voices of fathers, mothers, teachers, caregivers. Phrases like, "You're too sensitive. Don't make a fuss. If you don't do it perfectly, it's not worth it." Words that marked you more than you imagine, because what is repeated in childhood is etched as law, and without realizing it, you now speak to others, and to yourself, from that old script. Perhaps you react with coldness because you learned that showing tenderness is dangerous. Or perhaps you explode at criticism because you were raised under humiliation. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to transform it. Solomon said, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." What we learn in childhood becomes the map of adulthood. But every map can be redrawn. Every language can be rewritten. And the first step to changing what you say is to understand where what you repeat comes from. Remember, what words marked your childhood? What phrases do you keep repeating as if they were yours, but in reality belong to another time and another person? Perhaps it's time to return them, to look at them from a distance and say, "This no longer belongs to me." Because what you inherit without awareness, you perpetuate without intention, and many walk through life trapped in an emotional language that no longer serves them, but which they continue to use out of unconscious loyalty to the past. True emotional freedom begins when you choose what language you want to inhabit, when you stop speaking as a victim, and start speaking as a being who awakens. Solomon also taught us, "The heart of the wise makes his mouth prudent, and his lips increase learning." The wise person does not repeat what they inherited without thinking. The wise person transforms language, and in doing so transforms life. The creative power of naming what hurt. Many of our deepest pains do not come from what we experience, but from what we could never name. What is not said does not disappear. It hides, it transforms, it somatizes, and what is not expressed becomes a symptom: anxiety, insomnia, unjustified anger, a feeling of emptiness. Silence can be a form of protection, but it can also be a prison. When something deeply wounds us, often the first instinct is not to talk about it, but to silence it. We convince ourselves that if we don't say it, it will disappear. But the ignored wound does not heal, it festers, and it ends up speaking to us from the body, from dreams, from decisions we don't understand. Solomon reminds us, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. The wise person does not speak for the sake of speaking, but neither do they remain silent when the soul needs a voice. There are times when naming is an act of healing. It is the first step to stop silently carrying what weighs too much. Naming what hurts doesn't mean blaming. It means observing. It means saying honestly, "This hurt me. Here I lost something of myself. This still weighs on me even though years have passed," because what is named begins to move, and what moves can be transformed. In language lies the power to invoke the invisible. When you give words to an emotion, you give it form, and by giving it form, you are no longer at its mercy. Unnamed rage explodes. Wordless sadness consumes you. But when you dare to say, "I am sad, I feel lonely, I feel afraid," something changes. The soul recognizes that it has been seen. Solomon also warned, "Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body." Proverbs 16:24, Action 24, says Proverbs 16:20. Naming with compassion is a way of applying balm to the wound, of restoring dignity to the pain you had hidden. And remember, not everyone deserves to hear your story, but you deserve to tell it, even if it's in a whisper, even if it's just to yourself, even if it's crying. Naming the pain is the first step to letting it go. The language of love, more than pretty words. Saying "I love you" doesn't mean you know how to love. Words alone are not enough if the heart is not present. And in love, the most powerful language is not always heard, but felt. A gesture, a welcoming silence, a validating look, can say more than 1,000 empty phrases. We live in an era where love is quickly pronounced, but difficult to sustain. Canned phrases are repeated, social media messages are copied. "I miss you" is thrown out like loose change, without real presence. But the soul knows how to distinguish. The soul recognizes when language is true, and when it is not. It cools, withdraws, protects itself. Solomon expressed it with profound wisdom. Like a gold ring or an ornament of fine gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. Proverbs 25:12. True love does not merely flatter, it also guides, corrects with tenderness, elevates. The language of mature love includes truth, even when it is uncomfortable, because those who love are not afraid to say what is necessary, but know how to say it with compassion. And this is key. Many wounds of the soul do not come from harsh words, but from words that never arrived. Children who never heard "I'm proud of you." Partners who didn't know how to say "I'm sorry." People who needed a "I see you" and only received indifference. The missing language also hurts. Therefore, loving well is an art that begins with listening, because before speaking, one must understand. The wise person does not speak to fill silences, but to touch the soul, and when they do, their words heal. As Solomon wrote, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver." Proverbs 15:23. True love does not hurt with shouts or manipulate with flattery. Its language is consistent, What it says, it supports with actions. It is firm without being violent. It is clear without being cruel. It is warm without getting lost in the fear of causing discomfort. Speak with love, not only when you love, but also when you hurt. Because even pain, expressed with truth and tenderness, can bring people closer. And remember, not everyone knows how to speak that language, but you can learn it, and become a safe place for anyone who encounters your voice. Silence, the wisest language, when there are no words. In a world where everyone wants to speak, silence has become a luxury, a forgotten art, but the soul doesn't always need words. Sometimes what heals most is not what is said, but what is kept silent with intention, with respect, with wisdom. There are silences that hurt, like contempt, indifference, abandonment. But there are also silences that save, the silence that listens without judging, the one that accompanies without invading, the one that respects the other's time and doesn't pressure them to respond when they still don't have the strength. Solomon, in his eternal wisdom, stated it clearly: even a fool, when he holds his peace, is counted wise. He that shuts his lips is a man of understanding. To be silent is not weakness, it is inner strength, it is self-mastery, it is understanding that there are moments when any word would be a betrayal of the sacred, that there are emotions so deep they need space, not explanations, that there are pains that can only be contained, not corrected. Silence is also a language, one that communicates presence, peace, containment, a language that is felt in the chest more than in the ears. When someone is silent with you, without rushing you, without interrupting you, without trying to fix what cannot be fixed, they are saying, I am here, and your pain has a place within me. In our relationships, talking is easy, but knowing when to be silent is what builds real intimacy. Because silence is not always absence, sometimes it is depth, sometimes it is unadorned love, sometimes it is the space where the right word is born. Solomon also reminds us, whoever guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Not every truth needs to be spoken at the moment. Not every emotion should be thrown like a stone. The wise person chooses when to speak, and when to let silence speak for them. Learning to dwell in silence is returning to the essential. It is stopping filling the void with noise. It is allowing the soul to breathe without interruption, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to remain silent. Present, human, real. Conclusion: change your language, and you'll start to change your life. Perhaps you never stop to think about it, but language is a form of destiny. The words you choose every day, even the ones you utter in a low voice, just to yourself, are building your identity, your way of loving, of forgiving, and of living. Because you don't just speak to describe what you see, you speak to create what you feel, to uphold what you believe, to give form to the invisible. Language is not innocent, it has direction, it has intention, and you can use it as a sword, or as a balm. You can lift someone with a phrase, or destroy them with a sarcastic comment. You can open yourself to life with a word of hope, or lock yourself in a mental cell with a phrase of defeat. The choice, though subtle, is always yours. Solomon, with the calm of one who sees beyond time, wrote, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Proverbs 18:21. Your words are seeds. Sooner or later, they will bear fruit, and that fruit, good or bad, will not be harvested by the world, it will be harvested by you. Therefore, today I don't invite you to change the world with grand speeches. I invite you to start with yourself, with how you talk to yourself in the morning, with the words you use with those you love, with the silences you respect, with the phrases you decide to stop repeating, because every word is a choice, and every choice moves you away from, or closer to the person you want to be. Observe your language as one observes a garden. Uproot what harms, water what nourishes, and don't forget the soul flourishes when it feels heard, when it feels named, and above all when it feels spoken to with love. And you, what words are you sowing in your life? Leave us your reflection in the comments, and if this message resonated with you, subscribe to Ancient Mind, where the wisdom of the ancients is not just history, it is a compass for your present.